Let's review what we have learned so far. So I bring you the concepts in Python here in one video. So for that, we'll see this syntax formalities. So Python is case sensitive, which means that if you will say I equals to 5 and you'll print I, let me run the cell. So 5 will be printed. But if you change the case, that is from lower to upper, and then try to print it out, this will show an error because I is not defined. So Python makes use of whitespace for code structuring and marking logical breaks in the code. By that, I mean that if you are writing, so let me just remove the output over here. So if I will write over here for, and I'm going to write in a condition I in range of 11. So I'll have to put a colon over here, and the next line, it automatically takes one tab, that is 4 spaces, and then you will be writing what the result will be. So in the result, I have to run this loop and print every I in the range 11. So in other languages, what people normally do is for, they write the condition and then they use these curly braces. And over here, they write what they want to do. But we don't use these curly braces. So there's a lot of significance, importance given to these white spaces that we use for writing our logical breaks in the code. So end of line marks the end of a statement. So just let me run this cell quickly so as to show you that this works. So it's showing it's an invalid syntax. Okay. And now it's printing it. So the parentheses over here were redundant as we use in other languages. So no parentheses are required for writing a condition. And every number, every I from 0 till 10 is being printed over here. So end of the line marks the end of a statement. So it does not require a semicolon at the end of each statement. So in most of the languages, when you write a print statement or any other statement, you close it with a semicolon. But it's not required in Python. For example, if I write over here, Divya, and try to print it out with a semicolon, so Divya will be getting printed. If I remove this semicolon, then also Divya is getting printed. So semicolons are not required. Now white space at the beginning of the line is important. So this is called indentation. So I showed you a for loop example. So this indentation, this white space is known as indentation. In other languages, it is achieved using curly braces. So leading white space, that is spaces and tabs at the beginning of the logical line, is used to determine the indentation level of the logical line. So for example, when people write if-else code and nested if-elses, so they put in their condition, then use these curly braces, then put in another if condition, and then write what they want to do in this statement, and then an else block, what they want to do in this statement, and then they exit. So in Python, if you have to write the same if-else loop, so you have to use this if, then your condition with a colon, it will indent it, then write an if block again, put a colon, and it will indent it. So as you can see, if I write this print statement over here and then move out and write my else statement and tell it what to do, and then finally move out. So you see these indentation are showing which level I am in. So if there is just one tab space, I am in the loop of this first if. If there are two white spaces, then I am in the if block of this second if. So indentation level is determined by white spaces. So statements which go together must have the same indentation. So as you see, if and else are a part of this outer if loop. So they share the same white space, that is one tab space. So each such set of statements is called a block. So this is the if block. So this is the block of this first if statement over here because they share the same leading white spaces. So now let's move on to printing values with Python. So let me just introduce a new cell. So over here, if I'll write I equals to 10 and try to print it out by writing something else. So if I'll write in these quotes value is, and then I can simply write an I over here. So let's see if this works. It's throwing an error. What if I'll use a comma over here and then try to run it? So values, okay, I will run this again. So the value is 10 is getting printed. So it's as simple as that. In other languages, you might have to use %d or %s or something like that in order to print the placeholder values. But in Python, it's as simple as that. Value is, then leave a space, and then comes your variable. Now let's discuss about comments. So one-line comments are denoted by a hash at the start of the line, while multiple line or block statements start with triple quotes. So either triple single quotes or triple double quotes, as I had mentioned in one of my videos. So let's do this. If I'll put a hash over here and write print, and this will not print anything. If I'll run this cell, so nothing is getting printed. But if I remove this hash from over here, then this statement will run. This will not print anything is getting printed. So in a similar manner, this was a single line comment. But if I want to use, suppose in functions we use docstrings. So for that, I need multiple lines of comments. So in order to explain the function, so I can write this function loops over integers and prints the result. So this will also be not printed. Okay, this is getting printed, but with comments. So this function loops over integers and with these /n, which means a new line, and prints the result. So this basically is used in a docstring. Now let's move on to the example of indentation, which I have explained it earlier. So this is the for block, and this forms the block for this for loop, and this is the block for this if statement over here. This is the block for this else statement over here, and this is similar to using curly braces instead of using white spaces. So now let's move on to variables and data structures. So there are built-in types of data, which means that an integer value can be a data type, that is, in other languages you have to declare an int data type, a float data type, a byte data type, or a string data type, and then mention the name of your variables. But in Python, you just declare the variable as it is. It's the dynamic typing, and you don't have to worry about declaring them beforehand, and you can place your values over here. So there are some built-in data types that the variables can take. So a variable can be an integer, a floating point value, a string, Boolean value, that is true and false, date and time. So in Python, they can be these and you don't have to declare them beforehand. Also, there are additional data structures about which we have studied. So these are tuples, lists, dictionaries, sets, and so on. Now, a variable name is a name that refers to a value. So suppose I'm declaring I equals to false. I can declare F equals to 10.99, and I can declare B to be something like 66, and S to be a string value like this is me. So there's no need to specify the type to a variable, and Python automatically assigns. So let me just introduce you. Then print B, simultaneously print S. So as you can see, false 10.99, 66, this is me is getting printed. Now I have here also introduced some variables, that is counter equals to 100, which is an integer assignment, miles equals to 1000.0, which is a floating point variable, and name equals to address, so it becomes a string variable. And then if I'll print counter, print miles, print name, so just let me cut this out. And run the cell. So as you can see, 100 for counter, 1000.0 for miles, and Ajay for name is getting printed. Now I'm declaring a variable a equals to this much, b equals to 2.0, floating point, c equals to 0, which is a string, d equals to joy. So now I can combine integers with floats, so the sum of these values. But c plus d from over here, that is adding strings, means concatenating strings. So this is a typical example of operator overloading. Why? Because the plus over here is summing the values b plus a, but this c plus d over here is concatenating strings, not adding them or not summing them up. So let's remove this for the time being and run this cell. So as you can see, this much value got added to 2.0 and this is getting printed, and 0 and joy got added like this, that is they got concatenated. So let's move on with strings. String is a built-in string class named str with many handy features. In addition to numerical data processing, Python has a very strong string processing capabilities. Subsets of strings can be taken using the slice operator that I have discussed in my previous videos, with indexes starting at 0 in the beginning of the string and working their way from -1 at the end. So we'll discuss all of this. So let our string be, so let me introduce you to a new cell. And over here, I'll use str equals to hello world. You can write it in both single as well as double quotes. So if I'm going to print this string, so this is how it will work. And if I want to print the first character in this string, I can use this square brackets and put in the index 0. And now let's run it. So h is getting printed. What if I put in -1? Let's see. So this d, that is the last character, is getting printed. Similarly, string slicing can also be performed. So for that, what if I want to print the characters in this string? Let's first print the length of this string. So the length in this string, and let me comment all of this out. So the length of this string is 11. So what if I want to print the string from the character 3rd till 7? So which means that this h is at the 0th index, e is at the first index, L is at the second index, this L is at the third index. So this L at the third index will get printed, then this fourth index, that is O, will get printed, then this space which is at the fifth index will get printed because the space is also noted as a character in Python, and then this W which is at the sixth index, and this seventh index, that is O, will be left, not printed. So let's see what it's gonna print. So as you can see, LO, the space character, and W is getting printed. Now, strings in Python are immutable. Unlike other datasets, such as lists, you cannot manipulate individual string values. In order to do so, you have to take subsets of strings and form a new string. So these are immutable. For it means that if I'll try to remove the H with, suppose, an O, and then print this, so I'm just gonna copy it from over here, paste it. Let me comment this also out and run this cell. So as you can see, str object does not support item assignment, so that's why these strings are immutable. Now this plus sign is the string concatenation operator, as I've discussed earlier, and the asterisk is the repetition operator. So let's try it out. So what if I want to print this hello world 5 times? So I can do this by multiplying this string with 5. And what if I want to introduce an exclamation mark after this string? So I can do what? This str plus an exclamation mark, like this. So let's run this cell and see the results of both. So as you can see, I can also do a plus and a space and then multiply its result with 5. So hello world with a space, then hello world with a space getting printed 5 times. And over here, this hello world got concatenated with an exclamation mark. Now, a string can be converted to a numerical type and vice versa. Many a times, raw data, although numeric, is coded in string format. This feature provides a clean way to make sure all of the data is in the numeric form. So this can be done using int. So for example, if I'll introduce s equals to this 0, and then I'll try to print the type of this s. So let's do that. So the class is str. Now what if I want to print the int value of it, and let me run this. So 0 is getting printed, and if I put it in this type function, and run it, so class int is getting printed. So I can also cut it over here and do like this. So s equals to int s. If I'll print type of s over here versus type of s over here, let's see both the results, and let me just comment these out and now run the cell. So you can see the s type over here was string, but now since I converted it using this int function, so now its type is int. So now strings are sequence of characters and can be tokenized, and strings and numbers can also be formatted, about which we have discussed in my earlier lectures. So do go there and watch it out. So now let's move on to some string functions. So over here, I want to show this thing. So let me just copy it and I'll paste it over here, and instead of str, I'm gonna use str, which is hello world. So what is it doing? This hello world, I'm just gonna give a space over here. So it's gonna multiply it 9 times and then join and this joy is our string, and then this hello world, which will be printed 9 times, will be joined with this joy. So let's run it. So as you can see, this is hello world, and then it's being joined with joy, then a hello world joined with joy, hello world joined with joy, and so on. If I remove it, it will not work fine. So a hello world and a joy. This is how strings can be joined. They can also be joined using this concatenation operator. And then we had seen earlier that if we try to change a character in a string, that was not possible. But using this replace function, we can achieve the same result. So for example, I want to write, suppose here I'm going to write str dot replace this h with an o, and I'll store this result in the str string. So let's see what our result is going to be like. And let me comment all of these print statements. And run the cell. So as you can see, first hello world was getting printed, and now OLO world is getting printed because it got replaced using this dot replace function. Now, if you will try to concatenate a string with an integer, it will throw an error as I have shown you earlier. A string with a float, a string with an integer cannot be concatenated. So, because strings with strings, for example, A equals to this A and B equals to this B. So if I'll try to like concatenate them both, so suppose A plus B and run this cell, so it will be AB. But if I changed it to a 0 and then run it, so it does not know if I have to add or if I have to concatenate. So strings with strings, this plus sign works well. But if I had some other x value, so this is 0 and y is a float value like 7.77, let me do a 1.11, and then if I try to do an x plus y, so these are two different built-in types. These are two different built-in data types. So this is okay, so let me keep it an integer. So this is an integer built-in type, and this is a floating point. But now the plus sign knows that I have to add them both, so it will run fine, as you can see. Now let's try out the inoperator. So I've declared over here a variable named school equals to I as B, and now I'm going to print S in school, so and then print L in school. Let's see what it results in. So both are false. What if I would write here print capital S in my variable, which is school? So if is there any capital S in my variable containing the value ISB? So it's true over here.